Hi, peace lovers. It's December, and I'm still practicing my Kitty Compost voice. For these last couple of weeks of the year, I've gathered 17 holiday inspired public domain readings from writers like L. Frank Baum, Henry David Thoreau, and Charles Dickens. It's a bit quirky, I know, but so is Kitty, and so is the new Peace podcast series arriving right here on New Year's Day, the Peace Experiments, Experiment Zero. A humming government facility, a skeptical fact-checking goat, and a classroom full of teens collide when reporter Kitty Ocampos begins investigating the myths that keep peace just out of reach. The peace experiments explore what happens when young people finally ask the questions adults avoid. And perhaps you've been hearing the Next Peacelands here on the podcast. We'll be returning soon to the practice of holding peaceful intention for the specific war zones and the countries that supply weapons to them. But during this stretch of Kitty Reed's Holiday Lit for Peace, the Next Peacelands will simply offer the names of some of the spiritual organizations working quietly and steadily for peace. You can add your own peace intentions to their hopeful rivers of peace if you choose to stay through the end of this episode. As always, the creative books and projects I make for peace can be found at aviskalfsbeek.com, and the music for the Next Peacelands comes from the talented Javier Peque Rodriguez. For a printable list of all Kitty's holiday readings with links to the full texts, visit aviskalfsbeek.com/holiday or see the show notes. Joy and peace to you and yours and to the world. Now over to Kitty. Today's reading comes from Kate Douglas Wiggin, the American author and educator who believed that children deserve stories that honored their whole humanity, not just their sweetness, but their strength, curiosity, and capacity for goodness. Long before she became known for Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm, Wiggin helped establish one of the first free kindergartens on the West Coast, working directly with immigrant families who were building their lives from scratch. She carried those experiences into her fiction, writing about community, compassion, and the small exchanges that make a neighborhood feel like home. The Bird's Christmas Carol, published in 1886, is one of her earliest and most beloved stories. It follows a girl whose life is marked by illness, but brightened by a stubborn generosity. A child who looks outward, not inward, and who understands instinctively what grown-ups sometimes forget, that a holiday means very little if it doesn't open our eyes to someone else's needs. Wiggin wasn't writing sentimentality. She was describing a kind of kindness she'd seen in boarding houses, alleyways, and kitchens where people made the best of hard circumstances. We'll read just a portion today, enough to feel Wiggin's clear, hopeful voice and to notice how she treats compassion not as a grand gesture, but as a kind of steady work, quiet, practical, and contagious if you let it be. And well, honey, I could read the penciled note off a donation box if it helped remind us that generosity isn't measured in size, but in sincerity. Sometimes the gentlest stories carry us closest to peace, especially when nobody, for goodness sake, is holding a gosh darn gun. Following is an excerpt from The Bird's Christmas Carol by Kate Douglas Wiggin. 1. A Little Snowbird. It was very early Christmas morning, and in the stillness of the dawn, with the soft snow falling on the housetops, a little child was born in the Bird household. They had intended to name the baby Lucy if it were a girl, but they hadn't expected her on Christmas morning, and a real Christmas baby was not to be lightly named. The whole family agreed in that. They were consulting about it in the nursery. Mr. Bird said that he had assisted in naming the 3 boys and that he should leave this matter entirely to Mrs. Bird. Donald wanted the child called Maud, after a pretty little curly-haired girl who sat next to him in school. Paul chose Luella, for Luella was the nurse who had been with him during his whole babyhood, up to the time of his first trousers, and the name suggested all sorts of comfortable things. Uncle Jack said that the first girl should always be named for her mother, no matter how hideous the name happened to be. Grandma said that she would prefer not to take any part in the discussion, and everybody suddenly remembered that Mrs. Bird had thought of naming the baby Lucy for Grandma herself, and while it would be indelicate for her to favor that name, it would be against human nature for her to suggest any other under the circumstances. Hugh, the hitherto baby, if that is a possible term, sat in one corner and said nothing, but felt in some mysterious way that his nose was out of joint, for there was a newer baby now, a possibility he had never taken into consideration, and the first girl, too, a still higher development of treason, which made him actually green with jealousy. But it was too profound a subject to be settled then and there on the spot. Besides, Mamma had not been asked, and everybody felt it rather absurd, after all, to forestall a decree that was certain to be absolutely wise, just, and perfect. The reason that the subject had been brought up at all so early in the day lay in the fact that Mrs. Bird never allowed her babies to go overnight unnamed. She was a person of so great decision of character that she would have blushed at such a thing. She said that to let blessed babies go dangling and dawdling about without names for months and months was enough to ruin them for life. She also said that if one could not make up one's mind in 24 hours, it was a sign that, but I will not repeat the rest, as it might prejudice you against the most charming woman in the world. So Donald took his new velocipede and went out to ride up and down the stone pavement and notch the shins of innocent people as they passed by, while Paul spun his musical top on the front steps. But Hugh refused to leave the scene of action. He seated himself on the top stair in the hall, banged his head against the railing a few times, just by way of uncorking the vials of his wrath, and then subsided into gloomy silence, waiting to declare war if more first girl babies were thrust upon a family already surfeited with that unnecessary article. Meanwhile, dear Mrs. Bird lay in her room, weak but safe and happy, with her sweet girl baby by her side and the heaven of motherhood opening before her. Nurse was making gruel in the kitchen, and the room was dim and quiet. There was a cheerful open fire in the grate, but though the shutters were closed, the side windows that looked out on the Church of Our Savior next door were wide open. Suddenly a sound of music poured out into the bright air and drifted into the chamber. It was the boy choir singing Christmas anthems. Higher and higher rose the clear, fresh voices, full of hope and cheer, as children's voices always are. Fuller and fuller grew the burst of melody as one glad strain fell upon another in joyful harmony. Carol, brothers, carol, carol joyfully, carol the good tidings, carol merrily, and pray a gladsome Christmas for all your fellow men. Carol, brothers, carol, Christmas Day again. One verse followed another, always with the same glad refrain, and pray a gladsome Christmas for all your fellow men. Carol, brothers, carol, Christmas Day again. Mrs. Bird thought, as the music floated in upon her gentle sleep, that she had slipped into heaven with her new baby, and that the angels were bidding them welcome. But the tiny bundle by her side stirred a little, and though it was scarcely more than a ruffling of a feather, she awoke, for the mother ear is so close to the heart that it can hear the faintest whisper of a child. She opened her eyes and drew the baby closer. It looked like a rose dipped in milk, she thought, this pink and white blossom of girlhood, or like a pink cherub with its halo of pale yellow hair, finer than floss silk. Carol, brothers, carol, carol joyfully, carol the good tidings, carol merrily. The voices were brimming over with joy. Why, my baby, whispered Mrs. Bird in soft surprise, I had forgotten what day it was. You are a little Christmas child, and we will name you Carol, Mother's little Christmas Carol." "What?" said Mr. Bird, coming in softly and closing the door behind him. "Why, Donald, don't you think Carol is a sweet name for a Christmas baby? It came to me just a moment ago in the singing as I was lying here half asleep and half awake. I think it is a charming name, dear heart, and that it sounds just like you, and I hope that being a girl, this baby has some chance of being as lovely as her mother," at which speech from the baby's papa, Mrs. Bird thought she was as weak and tired as she could be, blushed with happiness. And so Carol came by her name. Thank you for listening and allowing me to practice Kitty's reporting voice for the big story ahead. Now stay with me a few minutes longer if you're able for the Next Peacelands. Following is a special holiday edition of the Next Peacelands, where we pause on listing the war zones and weapons suppliers. Instead, we rest our intention of peace on a few of the spiritual organizations working tirelessly toward peace. While this list is far from comprehensive, the total number of organizations, large and small, would number in the thousands if we included all who work daily for peace. I ask that you consider taking this time to add your own intention of peace to those working daily toward that goal. Mennonite Central Committee. Peace is here. Community of Santa Hidio. Peace is here. The Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers. Peace is here. Religions for Peace. Peace is here. Pax Christi International. Peace is here. American Friends Service Committee. Peace is here. Lutheran Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. The International Fellowship of Reconciliation. Peace is here. Baptist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Community Peacemaker Teams. Peace is here. Episcopal Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Friends Peace Teams. Peace is here. Muslim Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Buddhist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Quaker Peace and Social Witness. Peace is here. Network of Christian Peace Organizations. Peace is here. Network of Spiritual Progressives. Peace is here. United Religions Initiative. Peace is here. The Christian Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Peace is here. Agape International Spiritual Center. Peace is here.